This constitutional arrangement that we have is that the government will have its way. So the only thing we could do is talk.
And even so, Senator Roberts claims that right too is being eroded by the shortening of speaking time and chamber restrictions.
The COVID-19 protocols inside of this building do not even make sense. They have not made sense. All that they do is try to thwart our one thing that we can do, which is talk, give information so the media, the population can have. We've been curtailed. This building is huge. This constitutional.
Don't free my hands and leave my mind in chains. Don't say I'm free and you still washing my brain to do the things that you
take it no more. Give me money, woman, you give me before. Lord, God, I can't take it no more. Lord, you can't take it no more.
Politics, yo. Douglas politics. Listen, Douglas politics, yeah. Douglas politics. This is Douglas politics, yeah. Douglas politics. This is Douglas politics. Douglas politics. This is Douglas politics, yo.
Good evening and welcome to Douglas Politics, where the playing field is even. There's no crybaby here. Imagine Al-Rawi, Al-Recusal, Al-Rental, Al-Tight Pants, Al-Take all your money to outfit your own building, Al-Bray like a donkey, Al-Crybaby in the Senate. He have 15 senators, plus himself, plus Minister of Finance, plus them appoint the President of the Senate, the Vice President of the Senate. Them even have their own menu they just put. But he come to interrupt the Douglas. They cut with time already. They cut down with time that we cannot talk because COVID-19. And then he come, so can't take pressure, such a dance, creating laws that are openly biased, openly dictatorial, openly stamping on the constitutional rights of the citizens. The biggest dance as an attorney general in the history of the Caribbean. Carl Hudson Phillips must be rolling around in the grave. Ellis Clark, Keith Sobian, all of these people, even John Jeremy not in the grave, he's sitting down there saying, boy, this is my PNM, boy. This is a man, Keith Scotland and all must be sitting down watching this man and saying, boy, where we get this crybaby mascara wearing dunce to embarrass the People's National Movement and decades of membership and hierarchy to bring it to the lowest level ever seen. The only thing the opposition can do is talk. Our constitution that was given to us by the PNM based on lies put forward by Eric Williams to Rujanat Capildeo up in Marlborough House to tell him that he will see about the boundaries and he will do things and change the constitution once we reach back home, so sign this here. He never did. He never changed it, and now we're seeing gerrymandering going on in a deeper version as today in the Parliament. This same Attorney General again, Attorney General Crybaby, came into the Parliament now to bring a bill to instruct an order that the EBC change seats in Tobago from 12 to 15. So the EBC taking instructions from the PNM and the Crybaby Attorney General. But in the Senate, we get a bill. They come and they give we a bill on Friday evening until we debate it Tuesday morning. 24 hours, one working day. It's supposed to have 4 days so we could read, digest the bill, talking about a revenue authority to impact your life, your tax collection, to give people power to take your property, to take your constitutional rights. Them give the opposition 1 day to prepare. Okay, I take my day and I come prepared to destroy the piece of toilet paper that Al-Rawi bring there as a revenue authority bill with the minister appointed this and the minister appointed that and the minister and the PNM and the minister and they control and they can do what they want and come to Mama Guy and take away the constitutional majority required for dealing with people's enshrined constitutional rights and make it a simple majority based on spurious attempts to insulate. But the poor little Rawi, all the advantage here, like he playing on a football side with 15 man, and it's only me and Naked, it's 2 against 15, and he comes still to cheat more, to jump up every minute. 21 times that man stand up to interrupt me. He and well, Paula go to school, well, she's just encouraged. Poor thing, what a follower. Paula, poor you. You're in a rat's nest with dead snake and you following them. How embarrassing. I mean, the president of the Senate is a decent fellow. he was trying to be as fair as he could, and he handled it quite professionally. He's an honest PNM, the Vice President of the Senate, so I have no problem with him. But just look at Al-Rawi. Al-Rawi, were you afraid? You're afraid of Douglas? You is the Attorney General. You is the power man. You are special branch guarding you. You are SUV. You are outrider. You have entourage. You bring in the bill. You controlling the majority. You controlling we speaking time. You telling me what you can do. And then when man could come to talk, you're afraid to talk to. You're afraid intelligence. You cannot debate because you take so long in law school. Archie, show them now because they might feel. And let me tell you something. This is why I like Archie here is Mr. President today of Douglas politics. And I go in a little while to give him a presentation. But me ain't going to rush. Me ain't going to get interrupted. I'm going to give you more details because the information that this crybaby didn't want you to hear, you will hear it tonight on Douglas politics because my Senate contribution and the preparation that I did would not go to waste. It was done for you, not for me, for the people to know what this dictatorial, malicious, obsessive, oppressive government led by this tight pants wearing lawmaker in the day and lawbreaker in the night. The donkey brayer with man in a room. The man whose pants was so tight, he keep jumping up in the Senate because his balls was rubbing on one another. So he keep jumping up, standing on 46 1, 46 to them, 36 1, 53 1, top. Never as an Attorney General look like such a coward. Understand, the former Speaker of the House said, the opposition must have its say because the government would have its way. This little crybaby, so insecure in his position, trying to hopefully he want to be leader of the PNM and cannot even debate a total clown and a dunce, embarrassing history of the PNM yesterday in the Senate, stopping a senator from contributing. Also, the Attorney General is the one office that is a member of both houses, the lower house and the upper house. But the convention is that when the Attorney General comes up to the upper house, he does not behave like it's downstairs. He allows the proceedings to go. He's more of a listener and adapting to change and amend laws rather than a person coming to thwart the opposition or other senators speaking time. 21 times, all your count now. But I didn't know, you mightn't be able to count this one because we're just going to show you the amount of time. Over 10 minutes and 25 seconds of my time as a UNC senator. The UNC had 309,000 voters. Kamala Prasad Bisesa can only select, due to the constitution, 6 people. 6 people to represent that 309,000 people in the Senate. And I am one of those privileged to represent you, and I take my job very seriously. And the only job that we have is to research, to read, to look at the laws, and to give you the information so you would be aware of what this nefarious rental landlord is coming to do to you to ensure that his rent come on time. So when the Attorney General attacks and thwarts and takes away a further 10 minutes and 25 seconds of a UNC senator speaking time when the time has already been curtailed because of COVID-19. You understand how scared these little mama pools are, especially this little mascara makeup wearing one, this mascara makeup wearing. All you go and watch him in the face good when he go down in Gulf City Mall. Watch the powder on the face. He wearing more Maybelline than them girl and them with a long eyelash. This one, this coward, this crybaby. Archie, run it and show them that the Douglas not lying. Look how much time they took away from the UNC senator yesterday, but today on Douglas politics, Archie gave me my full time and more. I taking extra time like it's a World Cup final. Run it, Archie.
Roberts. 11, please. 40? 42, 11, please.
42, 11.
Honorable Senator, in relation to the way we present our speeches here in the chamber, we tend to try not to read it verbatim, but present it. So what I would invite you to do is to do just that in relation to putting forward your debate. Present it, you don't have to read it verbatim.
I'm not, thank you, sir, I'm guided.
Senator Roberts. Senator,
On Standing Order 53(1)B.
okay, so, Honorable Senator, a lot of the arguments being put forward now in relation to the bill that is before us have been said before. I will allow you to continue with what you're saying, but be mindful as you're making your presentation that we want to interject new arguments as well. We've heard quite a bit in terms of all of the speakers, government, opposition, and independent, that have come before in terms of certain key points. So as you move forward, be mindful, interject new points as well.
Brand new points. Thank you. I'm guidance. Tax holidays, incentives, and grants.
Senator Roberts, 1 second. Attorney General, yes.
Much obliged. I respectfully rise on 4210, evidenced by the fact that the member can't even see when I stand. 4211.
4211?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, Senator, again, we're talking about actually reading the speech versus presenting the speech. Again, I will allow you to continue, but just keep in mind that you want to present.
Thank you, sir. I hope that
That particular line is not, sorry again to interrupt, but that particular line is not relevant to what is before us in relation to the EBC, so just be careful.
Yes, sir. Thank you. According to the recently published report by Deloitte, credit and incentive
Attorney General,
economic stimulus.
I rise on Standing Order 46.6, Mr. Vice President, in relation to that comment on the EBC.
Okay, so I've already ruled, and that continues, Senator Roberts.
When the corona
46(1), please.
Okay,
I have yet
so-
to even hear a clause in the bill.
Right, so, Senator, that particular line that you're on in relation to property tax is thinly relevant to what we're doing. I would ask you to just tighten a little tighter if you can, or else move forward.
Thank you.
Is on Standing Order 53(1)B properly.
Attorney General, at this juncture, the member is calling out the clauses and he's moving now towards actually making his argument in relation to that. Senator, yes, that argument has been made, but like I said, be mindful that you want to interject new points in relation to what has gone before. So I'll allow you to continue at this juncture, but I'm listening with the new points as opposed to what has been gone before. Continue.
Brand new point of
Standing
Attorney
order.
General's offices.
I rise on Standing Order 46(1), Mr. Vice President.
Okay, so no, I will allow that particular line of argument as it's a
Brand new.
response to an argument that has been put forward before coming from the opposite side. Continue, Senator Roberts.
Thank you. Thank us.
46(1).
Senator Mark, let me hear the point of order.
46(1).
Okay, so Senator Roberts, please tie it in to what we're doing here. As I've given you the leeway to make the point, just tie it in.
Mr. Vice President, the Senator, Minister of Public Administration said that
Okay, so we are continuing to raise point of orders, and I'm ruling on them as they come. And I have no problem doing so. Senator, so you've made the point that you're making in relation to why the Treasury is empty in response to an argument that's been put forward earlier in the debate. So I would ask you now to move on from that because you've made that point.
Yes, Mr. President, but we must, I'm giving you the real depth of the emptiness of the Treasury because of the PNM incompetence and profligate spending. I'm only halfway done.
Right, and what I'm saying is that you're not going to spend 5 minutes going into the depth of that in relation to the response of an argument, because then you will be in breach of Standing Order 42(1) in relation to relevance. So what I'm saying is that you've made that point, and I'm asking you now if you wish to move forward. To
I will move forward, sir. No problem. Of the constitutional norms, values, principles, and protections.
1 second.
I rise most respectfully on Standing Order 4211.
Continue, Senator Roberts.
1B, if it's 52, the House and the Senate. Tedious repetition.
Senator, continue.
All board members,
46-1, and I honestly urge the honourable member to drop the paper 4211. I'd like to hear him.
It's 4211 and 1. Right. So, honourable member, the argument that he's making is tying into the functions of the board in relation to this particular bill. It is, in my opinion, slightly different to what has come before, and therefore I'm going to allow him to continue along those lines. Member.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Again, as I've always cautioned, always make it a new point.
New points, one after the next, sir. And then, because the decision was done in bad faith.
Mr. Vice President, I rise on Standing Order 46-1. The particular details of an NGC board have nothing to do with this debate, respectfully.
Okay, so, Senator, the point in relation to, which I think is what you're making, which is interference by way of a minister to a board, using other boards and that connection between a minister and board as examples to show where this particular bill would also have the same thing. So you've made that point by making several examples, of which now you're utilizing the NGC, which is what I think you were talking about, to also bolster that example.
Yes.
What I'm saying to you is, you don't have to go overboard in making your examples. Make your examples, and then you can move on to your next point, because that's where you would run into.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am very sorry for using so many, General. I won't use another one.
Attorney General, one second. Senator, first and foremost, you have 5 more minutes in your contribution. You don't need to embellish upon what I've ruled by responding to me in the way you just responding. I understand exactly what I've said, and I'm absolutely certain that you've also understand what I've said. Attorney General, you are raising a point of order. If it's in relation to what I just said, then there's no need to do so because it's being dealt with. Was it in relation to that or something else? Go ahead.
I'm rising on improper motives, squarely dictated and not dealt with by you under 46-6.
Okay, no problem. So, Senator, just be mindful of making improper or imputing improper motives in relation to members of either chamber. Continue. You have 5 more minutes.
Injury time, please, sir.
Normally, we don't do injury time, Senator Roberts. That is in the normal course of process by way of the debate that takes place where standing orders are raised.
Yes, sir, no problem.
Continue.
No problem.
I don't want to interrupt you.
I will stick a small pin right on total control.
Senator Roberts. I don't even have to wait for a standing order to be raised. I mean, it's not even been 15 seconds. And I think you know what I'm about to say. Please, 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 tone it down.
This bill is 14, 15.
46-6.
So, Senator Roberts, again, I don't know how best to say it. Just tone it down a bit in terms of the language.
Language?
Yes, the language. That's all I'm asking. Tone it down a bit in terms of the language.
Thank you. With TALPA, the Port Authority workers with the port.
Point of order 46-1, 46-6.
So, Senator Mark, please. So, what it is and what is happening is that accusations are being made, and it is skirting the line in relation to Standing Order 46-6, which is imputation of improper motive. That's why I've been asking to tone the language a bit. There's a way to say things so that you don't breach that particular standing order. So what I would ask you to do is to just finesse what you have to say a little bit more without using that type of language, which will put you in breach of that standing order.
All the workers of Petro political strategy.
No. Senator, Minister, please. So, Senator Roberts, that is exactly what I'm talking about. That is not allowed. That statement is not allowed. There's no response to be had in relation to it. It's just not allowed. I will give you a few seconds more to wrap up. because of the amount of times I have to get up to say that. You're obviously out of time now, but for the purpose of wrapping up, I will just give you a few seconds more to do so. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. 10 minutes and 35.4 seconds of UNC opposition time for the entire population, 309,000 people plus all the people who are interested in paying taxes and what is going to happen with the revenue, the PNM Revenue Authority that they're trying to force down your throat. A mascara man, crybaby, put him up, crybaby, talking about trying to say that eyes read. I am one of these senators who is debate without paper, but there are certain specific legal aspects and constitutional ones that you need to read. He government does walk with laptop and iPad and read out word for word, but he jumping up. Then he started, even the vice president in the Senate started to ignore because he was just being disruptive, arrogant, stupid, irresponsible, dotish, and crying down the place. And I will tell you, the vice president, he said it, I like he's a good PNM. He's an intelligent man. Poor fella that he had to deal with this sort of clown. But in some instances, they couldn't take. Imagine this clown here is trying to say that the NGC board incident, for example, that's in the papers now, that the NGC board went and they were coerced or instructed to take a decision to invest in Atlantic LNG Train 1, even though they only had a 10% shareholding and equity position. And the two major shareholders said that they are not going to put, and they don't have gas for it, and they're going to mothball it and not go further and not invest more. They were forced, the board was forced to go against information, research, advice, and a better judgment. They had clearly to make a decision that was not done in good faith. So they could not get directors' liability assurance out of Lloyd's of London, for example, because that insurance is based on making decisions in good faith, and then something happens and it goes bad. You are insured. They couldn't get that because it wouldn't qualify under the good faith principle. This revenue authority that they are proposing is to put a PNM board appointed by a PNM minister, just like the NGC board, who will take directions from the PNM minister, which is directions from the PNM cabinet. The NGC board had to ask the same PNM cabinet that if you made us take that decision, we want you to indemnify us from any future legal liability. And this clown here says that situation has no relevance with them trying to set up a revenue authority appointed by the PNM cabinet, appointed by the PNM Minister of Finance, to appoint a PNM board full of PNM board members, to appoint a PNM Director General, who will then appoint other Deputy Director Generals, and the Public Service Commission will appoint a Deputy Director Enforcement. And this dunce clown is saying that has absolutely no relevance to this situation. The track record of the PNM in controlling boards and controlling people showing that there is no political insulation. There is no insulation from political pressure being brought to bear by these clowns. Isn't that a very serious matter? Isn't that very applicable to this revenue authority bill? But anyway, he get mashed up. Actually, he get mashed up from start to finish, trying to rattle the Douglas. Boy, crybaby, makeup wearing clown, tight pants. How much growth hormone you take? Here now go and change pampers down in the constituency office. You can't rattle the Douglas. You must be mad. You make yourself look like a total pumps in front of the whole country. Watch how I finish him up there. How I mash him up. I mash him up at the end there. Actually just play that. And then, anyway, we go tell all you. Actually run it. The closing. Actually was trying to build up something there. We have a surprise coming for you. I have him doing too many things, you know. The Senate closing there, Archie, run it when you get it. You have it? Run it. Whether you go find it just now, when you find it, put up your hand. Because let me tell you something. It is a very sad day. I know you find it, you was trying to build up something special for all you coming up. Actually run it.
The workers of Petrotrin were told they were not being fired, and Petrotrin was closed down and shut down and has not opened up. Those are unionized workers. Caribbean Airlines, 450 workers. Port Authority, WASA workers now under threat. And right here, we're talking about PSA members and NUGFW members who are under threat of not only losing their jobs, but being told by the PNM that if you get into Balize House, you may get a job at this new revenue authority. This political strategy.
No. Senator, Minister, please. So, Senator Roberts, that is exactly what I'm talking about. That is not allowed. That statement is not allowed. There's no response to be had in relation to it. It's just not allowed. I will give you a few seconds more to wrap up, because of the amount of times I have to get up to say that. You're obviously out of time now, but for the purpose of wrapping up, I will just give you a few seconds more to do so. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. In this bill, the PNM government says that the PNM minister will appoint a PNM board. The PNM board will then go through an HR outfitting of this revenue authority, meaning that the PNM board will conduct advertisements, conduct interviews, and decide who gets their jobs in this revenue authority. And then it will be mixed with appointments from the Public Service Commission to pretend that there's insulation for the population, with one deputy director enforcement who has to then take instructions from the politically appointed director general, by the politically appointed board, by the politically incensed minister of the PNM. It is great illustration of the dictatorship of the PNM that my 30 minutes has become 18 because of an attorney general who's insecure in his ability and took too long in law school. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
Absolutely insecure in his intellectual ability. That done so frightened. You make yourself look exactly like you are a complete and total idiot. You took so long in law school. You come to take my time to talk. No big thing. We are Douglas politics. Archie, Douglas politics getting quoted in the newsday, in the newspaper. Douglas politics and the UNC, Douglas politics becoming nearly mainstream. But Archie, you boy, work the magic, Archie. Because I'll Rawi, I'll rental, I'll tight pants, I'll mascara, I'll foundation, I'll maybe mix Maybelline, I'll rent out the old Midland, I'll bray like a donkey, I'll wear tight pants and tight shirt with the same set of man in a small room. He thought he could stop me from giving the people the information. Well, we going and transform Douglas politics into the Atlantic Senate, and I going to present my arguments to you, the people, why the Revenue Authority bill that Al Rawi and the PNM are trying to shove down your throat must never be accepted. Why Kamala Prasad Bisesa said it going straight to court. Why it is oppressive. Why it is dictatorial, why it should never pass and see the light of day, why this government plays games and tramples on our constitution. In this Senate, I will not be interrupted by no makeup wearing clown under lights with a tight pants and a tight suit. I am going to take my time. In fact, Vice President Archie of Senate Atlantic, if I feel to go longer, can I go longer, sir? Thank you, sir. Transform us into Atlantic Senate. Archie. Thank you, Mr. Vice President of the Atlantic Senate. This bill, this Revenue Authority bill brought here by the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Dwayne, is not a reflection of what is required in this society. The Honorable Minister of Finance said here today that the Inland Revenue, the BIR, the Customs Duty is fraught. The Customs Office is fraught with corruption. These problems have plagued this country for 11 years as the PNM has tried to bring this legislation forward. But I say to you, Honorable Minister of Finance, you have been in control for 6 of those 11 years. You have done nothing to fix the BIR, the inefficiencies, the corruption. So is it the PNM position that you see a problem, you leave a problem, and then you come with a bill to give the PNM total control over the people's money, the people's property, the people's taxation, the people's business? You put the PNM in control, and that is your solution. Well, the UNC is here to say that we do not accept that solution. This is not PNM country, and this Revenue Authority bill does not solve any problems. And this debate here today is not about the efficacy or brilliance of revenue authorities in other jurisdictions, whether Guyana, Barbados, in Europe. We are talking about Trinidad and Tobago that has the blight of the PNM. These other countries do not have the PNM. They do not have this prime minister. They do not have this dictatorial tendency to control every aspect of life in Trinidad and Tobago. These other countries have independent institutions that are functioning. Unlike here, the Honorable Minister of Finance attacked the public service to say that they're lazy and efficient. This coming from a government who's led by a prime minister who spends more time on the golf course than in cabinet, who spends more time relaxing at Mount Irving than spending time dealing with people who are suffering in a pandemic and flooding. This from a government that is the laziest government in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. This from MPs who only see 25 people on an office day. When Kamla Prasad Bisesa and the UNC were in government, some MPs would see 600 people in one day. He attacks not only the public service, he attacks the Public Service Commission and says that they cannot appoint, they have vacancies that they cannot fill. But he, the PNM, with the PNM policy, the PNM bursaries, the PNM nepotism, the PNM corruption is coming to tell the population, great is the PNM, we will fill all these vacancies. But the population will not feel safe. They do not trust the PNM. They do not trust this Minister of Finance. They do not trust this Attorney General. And therein lies the problem. This bill, the 2021 version, was just brought like a thief in the night. Was brought just like a petrotrin refinery floating in the wind in the dark of night. The Joint Select Committee that met for 3 years, consulted, held discussions, put their work together. They weren't even consulted. While this Attorney General, who spent an inordinate amount of time in law school, comes to tell this country that their constitution doesn't matter, their enshrined rights don't matter, he is going to make and tweak 1 or 2 items and take away the need for an opposition, the need for support, the need for a special majority, and this cannot be accepted. And that's why the Honorable Leader of the United National Congress has said this going straight to the courthouse. This PNM government has removed the constitutional majority, 3/5 majority, and replaced it arbitrarily by a simple majority. There is nothing simple about this bill. This bill is sinister. Let me get into the facts and the awesome responsibility of a revenue authority, about corporate governance, about taxation, about the concept and philosophy of taxation. Taxation is for representation. Taxation cannot be to pay rentals of attorneys general, cannot be to pay, dig in the people's pocket to pay for outfitting of the building of the Honorable Attorney General, or to dip in the pocket to pay friends, financiers, family, and borrow money from a little small shop on the Arapita Avenue. It is quite peculiar and indeed characteristic of this callous, uncaring government that the very first bill being brought in the second session of the 12th Parliament is wholly concerned with the government's ability to enforce and collect taxes upon a citizenry that has been virtually impoverished and oppressed by the PNM. This last 18 months has seen torture across the board in our societies. People have lost their jobs. They're unable to support their families. Single mothers are crying out, begging for hampers. Even in the distribution of hampers, this PNM government finds a way and a mechanism to ensure that only those who they see as political supporters receive food. This PNM malicious regime even politicizes food. Yet they come to tell us, trust them with our tax money. Trust them with our property. Trust them to be fair. Trust them to run the revenue authority. Trust them to appoint the board. Trust them to appoint the director general. The state agency, which now sees a dismantling and the reabsorption of two pre-existing agencies, the BIR and Customs Excise, which currently operate within the parameters of the public service. The public service is created and is the genesis, even though it has been warped by the PNM and decades of PNM rule. The concept is that the public service is apolitical. There are insulation between the political directorate, the executive, and the citizens. They are there to protect, not to be influenced, not to take directions, not to take guidelines, not to take policy from. They put it into one overarching authority that defies established principle of sound corporate governance, vests extraordinary powers and access to private information in the hands of politicians, and removes citizens from under the provisions of safety and security of the public service, and now places them in the hands of politically appointed officers. The government's prime prioritization of not just taxing and suffering the population, but ensuring draconian punitive measures to anyone found in breach remains in stark contrast to effective governance structures employed across the globe. In countries like the UK, New Zealand, Australia, Britain, Canada, USA, governments have taken the time to support their citizens, to assist them in maintaining their homes, their businesses, their employment. They have given grants on a timely basis. The United States of America has spent approximately $4.8 trillion to support its citizens. But here, this PNM, under a prime minister who prefers to play golf and spread COVID-19 in Tobago and change the number of seats over there arbitrarily from 12 to 15 by instructing the independent EBC so to do, he prefers to dip and tax, property tax, by November 30th, Revenue Authority to collect more tax, to grab more tax, to keep more tax, to spend on their friends and family. The property taxes are oppressive, and the inconsistent customs rates, law enforcement, and of course this brand new, never before seen bill that we are here to debate with no protection whatsoever by this callous PNM government, from the banks, from the financial institutions, the landlords, and others demanding their pound of flesh. No protection. This government has not come to this Senate, this honorable house, to protect citizens, to help them to stop losing their homes, to protect them from landlords throwing them out on the street. Nonetheless, here we are, and debate we must. What is even more alarming than the subject of the bill itself is the flagrant flouting of sound corporate governance principles in the very creation and structuring of the PNM Revenue Authority. In the CAF, the Development Bank of Latin America Guidelines for Good Corporate Governance of State-Owned Enterprises, it states, in the absence of proper public controls, the state can use state-owned enterprises as an instrument of fiscal policy, or in extreme cases, as a clientelist political culture by the government in office, involving itself in the daily operation of the company to fulfill electoral favors. That is the PNM tradition. That is the PNM example. That is what we see at Heritage, at Petrotrain when it shut down. That is what we see at NGC. That is what we see at Namdevco. This PNM wants to control every aspect of your life, and now they want to control your taxes and your property. The PNM Prime Minister's infamous Cosa Nostra speech shows that the government, the people cannot trust this government with their private information, because the mere fact that a prime minister knows in depth the philosophy, the belief, the vision, and the mission of the Cosa Nostra and its secrecy. The mere fact that he talks about that openly and he shows that his government has uplifted those who hold secrets, put them in charge of companies, oil companies, even though they know nothing about that. But they cannot divulge secrets because they happen to be the personal attorney and lawyer of the Prime Minister. This Cosa Nostra has transcended every aspect of governance and life in Trinidad and Tobago under this corrupt regime. The government must be held to the highest standards of corporate governance, transparency, and accountability. And that is in management of statutory authorities and state enterprises. This now is an agency of the government to handle taxation and property seizures. This is a very critical element. And shouldn't it be held to the highest standard of corporate governance, meaning no political interference whatsoever, independence throughout the process for the country and the people to have confidence? No, not this PNM. They believe that they must put PNM throughout like Balizé juice injected in our veins for us to feel safe that they will be efficient, as if we don't live here. This bill flouts the law and the constitution of the land. The lack of corporate governance in a state-owned enterprise will reduce the credibility of the state, as we have stated, and undermine the legal framework, creating a loss of confidence. This is what was stated in the CAF report and the OECD report. In the process, mistrust of government, increases in non-compliance. So if people do not trust the process, this government is saying the revenue authority that is politically appointed, politically influenced, will increase taxation, take, and so on. Really? If people do not trust the process, there will be more appeals, there will be more, the people will not be readily able and willing to pay their taxes, there will be more questions asked, the system will become clogged because they do not trust you. When public companies are well governed and well managed, when the example in the government is good, this transcends the entire country. So the opposite appears to exist here in Trinidad and Tobago now, where the government companies, the state-run agencies by political appointed boards with interlocking directorships and friends and family of the Prime Minister controlling all the resources. They can see that corporate governance has been thrown out the window, and across the board, if there's non-compliance, that's because the leaders are not compliant. The leaders are not showing or living by example, and that is what is going on, and the decay of the society begins from the top. If the head of the fish is rotten, so shall be the entire society. So don't blame the tail when the head is rotten. The PNM's new society, as espoused by Keith Christopher Rowley, is one of the total collapse of the independent institutions, the breakdown of corporate governance structures, ballooning corruption, suppression of citizens' rights, poverty, and loss of hope. Unfortunately, under this PNM regime, in 6 years, we have plummeted on the competitive business index from 65th in the world to a paltry, depressing 107. The Honorable Minister of Trade was talking to us how low we are on the tax intake or the tax production sector. Why didn't you tell us how we have dropped, Minister of Trade and Industry, under your watch in the competitive index, when we have dropped in foreign direct investment from a positive 2 billion US down to a negative 439 million US. Madam Minister of Trade and Industry, or should I call you Madam Minister of No Trade and Very Little Industry? State-owned enterprises and boards should effectively carry out their functions of setting strategy and supervising management based on broad mandates and objectives set by the government. They should have the power to appoint and remove the CEO. Not in this revenue authority. The CEO is the Director General. The Director General here is appointed by the Minister. The Minister, Colm Imbert, will appoint the Director General, not the board. So he appoints the board. He appoints the Director General. He guides the Director General. The Director General is guided by the PNM board, and you're supposed to have confidence in them to come and tax you. They should not be used as pawns of the minister, says the OECD. To follow his directions, clause 14.1 dictates guidance and instructions. State-owned enterprises board composition should also have the opportunity and ability to exercise objective and independent government judgment. E-mechanisms should be implemented to avoid conflicts of interest. This from a government. This is what should pertain. But in this government that is telling you that political interference would not impact negatively in the performance of the revenue authority, that everything will be kumbaya. This government is the first government in history to sit at the highest level of cabinet and have 92 recusals between two sitting cabinet ministers. Yet the highest principles of corporate governance and management states that mechanisms should be implemented to avoid conflicts of interest. This government, this PNM government, sprints towards conflicts of interest. They love conflicts of interest. They hug up conflicts of interest. And preventing board members from objectively carrying out their board duties, and to limit political interference in board processes. These are the principles that should apply when appointing independent, critical, important boards and revenue authorities or other authorities to perform such tasks that are sacrosanct. But the opposite has been laid in the Senate, and then they remove the constitutional majority, the need for it, and put a simple majority. I must simply pause for the population to digest. In your face, the in-your-face irony, hypocrisy, and downright bold-facedness of this marginal PNM government. The PNM ministerial power is espoused in this bill in clauses 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, 24, 25, 30, 41, and 42. All of those clauses speak to ministerial power. Minister West, a former minister in the Ministry of Finance and the Minister of Public Administration, stated that due to more and more demands being made by the population on the shrinking coffers because of COVID-19, the government needs to put this politically created machine to dip in the pockets of the citizens. Well, Minister West, the coffers are shrinking because of you, the PNM. The coffers are shrinking because of your incompetence, your inability to diversify the economy. The demands that you and your government's policy and spending, the profligate spending of the PNM of which you are a part, and you will be very well aware, as soon as you became a minister, nobody knew who you were, but we knew that your niece got a HDC house. The PNM has wasted and squandered in 5.5 years. I won't even go to the full 6. The following money, 500 million wasted in NGC, 1.2 billion on an airport with no tourism, rentals from the recusal twins in millions of dollars, borrowing from small companies on the avenue at increased inflated interest rates, and saying that they won tenders over huge, massive banks and financial institutions that accrue economies of scale. They invested in coffee breweries like Barista, questionable companies, overpriced, poorly procured ferries, Bridgman's, the crooked deal, the crooked money as espoused by your very own Prime Minister, has reached 175 million and counting. 110 million for the President's house, 20 million for the PM's Tobago residence, 200 million on 2 stadia locked up all the time and not utilized by citizens, 400 million on 2 cutlass vessels that were not requested or audited or needed by the Coast Guard, while all the other vessels were parked up for lack of diesel, and these boats still remain parked up as the borders are porous. 64 million on reports that said do not shut down Petrotrin, yet Petrotrin is shut, locked, and never opening. Building ponds in Laventille and Maloney and telling the people that it's Olympic-sized swimming pools. foregoing 700 million US in a deal to sell the Petrotrin refinery and say, no, we don't need the money. Now you need the money. Now the state needs resources. You didn't seem to need it when you looked across at Patriotic Energies and said, nah, man, keep that 700 million US. We don't need that. Hypocrisy. You forego 300 million in a higher bid from an insurance company for the CL financial portfolio and give it to another company close to the Minister of Everything for 300 million less. You forego $300 million, then telling the population you need the money like Maxen House. Spending money to refurbish old Ministry of Community Development in a pandemic and the Galera Lighthouse, millions on a P&M Commission of Inquiry headed by the only human being in the world who endorsed Emailgate to investigate a highway servicing the people, while the P&M spent hundreds of millions and not a highway completed. Where the Valencia highway reached, how much money spent, where the people to Point Fortin they reach yet? Failure to diversify the economy has the coffers empty because of your brains in the cabinet being empty. Your cabinet is bereft of intellectual capital. The coffers are shrinking because of P&M incompetence. The coffers are empty because of P&M corruption. This bill tramples on the rights of citizens. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is also what the honorable courts have referred to as a lens of interpretation, meaning that every law, whether we are considering here in Parliament or whether a judge is considering it in a judicial sense, must be interpreted in light of constitutional norms, values, and protections. My fellow senators have already argued in relation to the Endell Thomas protection being undermined. I agree, we must protect the public service from the executive overreach and insulate public servants from the influence of politicians who may abuse their office and effect political agendas. I have a different angle to the same problem. While the Endell Thomas point is very important, it is my view that the legislation also offends certain fundamental rights and freedoms in our Constitution. I have in mind Section 4A and Section 4B of our Constitution. Section 4A, and I quote, "The right of the individual to life, liberty, security of the person, and enjoyment of property, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except by due process of law." Section 4B states, "The right of the individual to equality before the law and the protection of the law." Taxation has always raised serious legal issues. No taxation without representation was the cry of the American Revolution. The Magna Carta, which set out the constitutional framework for the English common law, was a document extracted from a king when his barons revolted against deprivation of property and excessive taxation. This is how dangerous this bill is. A politically motivated, politically influenced, politically outfitted institution to be able to take people's hard-earned assets. A very serious thing. Anarchy has reigned, revolts, overthrows have occurred in history when taxation was not seen to be independent, fair, impartial, and unbiased. Therefore, any legislation which involves taxation, whether it be the introduction of a tax or the methods of enforcement for taxation or the powers given to tax collectors, is going to create by itself constitutional issues. So no simple majority, Mr. Simpleton. This legislation is particularly serious. It is a complete upheaval of the administration of taxation in our country. We are moving from a system of public service collection and enforcement towards a politically driven entity under the direct control of the minister. In my respectful view, that cataclysmic shift is one which is at odds with Section 4A of the Constitution. Taxation, and particularly its enforcement, involves the deprivation of property. The part of Section 4A which attracts my attention is the due process element. What is due process? Let's go carefully. We're not rushing. Senator, the Honorable President of the Senate, Archie, has said, take your time. I will take my time. What is due process? No legal authority is required to understand that due process means that an individual is entitled to enjoy impartiality when it comes to the determination of his rights. We must ask ourselves, can it truly be said that, for instance, a Director General who is appointed by a Minister of Finance would conduct his enforcement duties in an impartial manner? Could we really believe that? Has the track record of the PNM under Keith Rowley shown that? Or has it shown the absolute opposite? In the case of Thomas versus Batiste, the Privy Council opined that due process meant the due process clause requires the process to be judicial, but it also requires it to be due. In their lordship's view, due process of law is a compendious expression in which the word law does not refer to any particular law and is not a synonym for common law or statute. Rather, it invokes the concept of the rule of law itself and the universally accepted standards of justice observed by civilized nations which observe the rule of law. The clause thus gives constitutional protection to the concept of procedural fairness. How can citizens who are not aligned to the PNM receive procedural fairness in such an authority appointed, created, and manned by PNM? One would know that the procedural fairness has two limbs. We always hear of the right to be heard, but procedural fairness also comprises a rule against bias. No man is to be a judge in his own cause. It is a rule which ensures impartiality. No man is to be a judge in his own cause. Yet we are seeing in the fake oil matter that the very friend of the Prime Minister and the very government who instituted the audit and that minister and board being fired, and now their very own senior counsel is telling them to appeal. But yet the citizens have seen or heard of no appeal in the fake oil arbitration matter. Does this sound like a government that can be entrusted with all this power, and then when they get that power, that they would wield it with impartiality and without bias? I think not. In particular, constitutional principles are meant to strike a balance between the individual and the state. It is obviously in the state's interest and in the Minister of Finance's interest to collect as much taxes as possible. It is also to be the benefit of the state to enforce payment of taxes in an uncompromising way. So, on the one hand, you have a political creature in the Minister of Finance saying, give me all the taxes that you can. And if persons fail to pay the taxes, then enforce as strictly as possible. On the other hand, you have an individual saying, I should not pay this level of taxes because I am exempted, or I didn't earn this amount, or for any other legal reason. The first assessor and the body in charge of treating with that conflict is the BIR, now to be called the PNM Revenue Authority. The law currently ensures that impartial public servants whose employment is secure, whose pension is secure, and who cannot be disciplined by a minister make decisions on the first assessment of the tax and determines the liability of citizens. We are now moving from that to people who are there to enforce, whose longevity, whose security is on contract. They mix in some hybrid and throw in a Director General Enforcement appointed by the Public Service Commission, but that public servant has to report to the politically appointed Director General. That deputy has to report to the PNM, and the PNM is guided by the PNM board appointed by the PNM minister, and you must have confidence in that, and that must uphold the constitutional rights and not breach our constitution. There is need for a special majority on this legislation. That is why Faris Al-Rawi, the Attorney General, and the PNM has continually come into the Parliament to thwart the opposition, to thwart the Constitution that was there and put whatever little it could do to act as checks and balances. They are being removed one by one, and all of the people in this country will suffer because of it. Let's go to some clauses of this PNM bill. Clause 7. Clause 7 of this Revenue Authority PNM bill says, all members of the board will be appointed by the minister. Look at some examples of the boards that exist now appointed by the minister. Noel Garcia at UDCOT spending all the money building airport, hospital, health center, community center, police station, stadium, refurbishing buildings, and he's also in charge of all houses to be built. That's the PNM way, that's the Rowley way. Eustace Nances on about 8-9 boards. Ingrid Lashley, a woman who was there, who did not implement the 2% loan and mortgage for you to buy houses. Now a PNM jump out and is on 6, 7, 8, 9 boards. That's the PNM way. Friends and family in control. And that's what's going to happen here. The entire Economic Development Board resigned under Dr. Terence Farrell. And that was it replaced by independent people to guide the cabinet forward? No, it was left unmanned, and then a new concoction came up from the PNM that involved a super minister's father to talk to all investors. But Clause 7 deals with the composition of the board. The attempt at independence, insulation, is the appointment of the permanent secretary at the Ministry of Finance on the board. So this is what the PNM is saying. Hey, it's independent, public servant, permanent secretary. We put them there, they are not PNM, they don't. But let's check. The last two permanent secretaries of the Ministry of Finance are Mr. Vishnu Danpal and Ms. Alison Lewis. Alison Lewis is now the PNM chairman of the Port Authority, the PNM chairman who approved Bridgemans, the PNM chairman who allowed Rowley to say they didn't find any boats in their tender when there were 11 boats found in the last tender for the ferries. He scuttled that and then put himself and Smallpin and another committee to buy the Galleon's passage and then to go to Australia, meet with CEO in Incat and Hostal and spend your money. That is a former permanent secretary. That's who they say go protect we. They will protect the people because they are so independent. She is also the vice chair of Nikwan, a PNM company that cannot produce a bit of diesel up to now. All it did is blow up and can't pay its workers. But it have ministerial gas given by the late Franklin Khan, who's a PNM minister. All the assets of World GTL, who's Malcolm Jones. Oh, Malcolm Jones, lawyer, Stuart Young, pulled him out of court. Stuart Young still got his fees. Malcolm Jones, those assets worth $3 billion, handed over to Nikwan for $10 million US cash plus $25 million in shares, which now are worthless. And that's Alison Lewis. She, the permanent secretary, is the PNM's version of protection and insulation for you, the citizens. Vishnu Danpal. Where did I hear this name? He's a former permanent secretary, most recent in the Ministry of Finance. Oh, he just received his instrument from the PNM, appointing him to the cushy job of High Commissioner to London. That's independence for you. That's going to protect you. That's what they're saying. Remember Vishnu Danpal last year in the COVID expenditure when the UNC was saying they're digging out and emptying the treasury? He came out as a permanent secretary espousing political rhetoric and so on. And I told you, but isn't a permanent secretary just to give us figures? But he gave us politics and we see why. He's now a politician. Good luck to you all. Theoretical impartiality under this PNM equates to practicable political partisanship. The PNM significant others are PSAs. The reason PNM ministers have to walk up and down the magistrate court is because permanent secretaries are close to them. If it's not their wife, it's their husband. If it's not their husband, it's their... Right. But they would do things for PNM ministers that they won't do for opposition ministers who end up in government, because we follow the letter of the law. Some of them are up the courthouse because they were so close to the permanent secretaries that checks were given even though companies didn't exist, NGOs weren't registered, and they had no bank account, but a check drawn up. Could that ever happen unless the permanent secretary was not doing the job properly? That's the only reason it happened. In summing up so far, a PNM minister appoints a PNM board made up of PNM supporters of the PNM. The PNM board then hires PNM employees loyal to the PNM board who take instructions from the PNM minister. The PNM board will conduct internal audits of the PNM employees, all overseen by the PNM appointed Director General. This PNM team now has total control and power over the most sensitive, personal, private information of all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The independent institutions in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, under this PNM government, they are all under siege. Ask the former central bank governor and then listen to the now central bank governor who espouses PNM fiscal policy even though he is in charge of monetary policy and the head of an independent institution. Check the service commissions. Check the TTPS right now. The Prime Minister appointing police to investigate certain specific matters. The Honorable Minister of National Security previous saying in the JSC that police reporting to him on the whereabouts of Khadija Amin, Saddam Hussein, Jolene John and Rudal Munilal. Now you have the PM appointing and using intelligence agencies to investigate the Commissioner of Police and other high-ranking officers. That's what's going on. The EBC is now taking instructions from Rowley and his cabinet on how many seats and where the seats could go. Is this independent? What about former independent senators like Helen Drayton, who attacked Kamala Persad-Bissessar as Prime Minister time and time again right here in the Senate? And then as soon as Kamala Persad-Bissessar was defeated by a slim margin, Helen Drayton jumps out as the PNM chairman of CNMG. Now she's the PNM chairman of NIB. How quick the independents turn red with a balize on it. A former integrity commissioner who, in the face of fake pieces of toilet paper, the whole world telling you, the commissioner of police, former and now, telling you rubbish, fake, Google tell you fake, anybody, any computer person, a little 5-year-old could tell you fake. He said, nah, it's not whether his emails, we have to study the contents, just like this Attorney General who wears makeup here today. He is now in charge of a commission of inquiry to investigate land acquisition under a highway that bill, while them ain't building nothing. What about Transparency International? When Kamala Persad-Bissessar was Prime Minister, Transparency International, every day they have something to say. The head was Derek Murray. Where's Derek Murray now that the PNM is in power? Oh, he's a cushy job. The High Commissioner to Jamaica. Not to mention, not even the morning brew remains unscathed from this PNM lust for total, complete and utter control. They changed the morning brew from Nescafe and milk to Balize tea. PNM's theory for emptying citizens' pockets through the PNM Concoction Authority is that it is stronger, more efficient, better oversight, more information gathering, potential, less loopholes for citizens to escape the long arm and sticky fingers of the PNM, more checks and balances, better corporate governance. Well, okay. Where was this argument used by the PNM now to impose a political revenue authority to tax you or to take your property? Where were all these arguments? When they came and gutted the procurement legislation, which was put there to protect the people from them, the government. They use the reverse arguments. Hypocrisy in your face. This is the bill of an arrogant, narcissistic, self-serving, self-centered, heartless dictatorial regime intent on total control. This bill is dangerous, illustrated by the anti-democratic, anti-corporate governance, anti-transparency, anti-accountability, anti-separation of powers of the clauses in the bill. clauses 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 24, 25, 28, 30, 38, 41, and 42. For example, Section 13, the Director General and Deputy Directors General must be appointed by the Minister, and for 5 years. So no job security, and must do the bidding of the Minister. Plus the Minister will choose. Who we going to choose? Anil? 14.1, Director General, which is about equates to the CEO, will advise the Minister. The PNM Minister directs the Director General, and the PNM Board oversees, directs, and monitors the Director General, who's appointed by the PNM Minister. 14.2, the Deputy Director General of Enforcement, it will come from the public service. But Section 14.5c says, subsection 2a, the Deputy Director General Enforcement is subject to the general directions of the PNM Board. So they come to say, this is why we don't need the special majority, because the Deputy Director General Enforcement is a public servant appointed by the Public Service Commission. But then they say, after he appointed, he had to take instruction from the board. Who appoints the board? Who will be making up that board? PNM people. The Director General Enforcement is subject to the general directions of the PNM Board, which shall be communicated to him through the politically appointed Director General. I ask you at this juncture, what's the need for all this political interference? What's the need for all this political control? All over other jurisdictions, revenue authorities are totally independent. Why did the PNM not appoint a totally independent committee like some of the truly independent senators? Put a committee of 3 and let them hire the Director General and give him 10-year security and let them manage and let them get a budget with no influence whatsoever, guidance, advice, nothing from the PNM. They would never do that. But here it is, the Enforcement Division is to be appointed by the Public Service Commission. Okay, that sounds like we insulated, that is independent. But then some contract workers to work with the Enforcement Division will be hired by the board also. So they have a hybrid. Some insulated, some political. So it has political mako to watch the independent or to influence so to be. It's fake corporate governance. The board controls, hires, fires contract workers. The public service handles the public servants. How ludicrous. Why this confusion? Why this conundrum? This weakens job security, increases opportunities for bringing pressure to bear. The PSC for discipline. The PSC could discipline the public officers, not the contract ones, the public officers. But the PNM minister could fire the Deputy Director General Enforcement, who's hired by the PSC. The minister could fire him for non-performance. How would the minister determine what is non-performance if he doesn't perform the dictates of the PNM and the minister? See how dangerous this bill is? They could borrow money with only the approval of the minister. They could invest, the authority could invest with the approval of the minister. Well, the next thing your money reach Barita. The PNM got procurement, now they got Central Tenders Board. So they put in these people here now who they appoint to be exempt from Central Tenders Board, so they could procure without procurement. They could procure from the friends and family of the PNM. The 3-month delay, this board will give the minister a report, a yearly report on your taxation and what took place. The minister will get the report, and here, Section 30, Clause 30, the minister will have 3 months to lay the report. What's the delay for? For him to read the report, vet it, see what he likes, see what he don't like, edit it, and then lay it? Why does the report go to the minister in the first place? It's not the minister's business. Secondly, why does the minister get that opportunity to read and influence the report before laying it in Parliament? Immunity and indemnification. Why not get director's liability for the board members? They have immunity, so any poor decision, any decision that is coerced, any pressure brought to bear and making a bad decision, they're immune, they're indemnified from being forced to do wrong things. Does that sound like a system that is fair? Does that sound like good corporate governance? Clause 41 and 42, ministerial interference, power, control, and direction, making regulations and schedule. That's all the minister. Imagine Coleman but doing all of that to you. This bill is a union-busting bill. The PNM has attacked labor like never before. OWTU, the strongest union in the history of the Caribbean, has been obliterated by the shutdown of Petrotrin. The rehiring of workers willy-nilly, unrepresented at Heritage, Paria, and other make-up, break-up companies. Caribbean Airlines, Talpa, 450 workers gone. Port workers now under threat. WASA workers, TNTech workers. Now this so-called Revenue Authority bill will shut down, lock down, and block down the PSA and the NUGFW. Workers will perish, and only those who somehow lucky to get the favor of the PNM appointed board and the PNM appointed Director General, they'll be lucky to get work. Now this so-called Revenue Authority, there's also a political strategy. Because on Tuesday in the Senate, the PNM puts this bill to debate involving the PSA. And Watson Duke has to deal with that, read it, vet it, only had one day to fight it, to make statements. The PNM then on Wednesday in the Low House puts a bill, the EBC order, to change seats in Tobago, where the PDP, Watson Duke, has to read, vet, and argue. So they're splitting Watson Duke's duties, dividing to conquer. That might be brilliant political strategy, but for Trinidad and Tobago, for patriotism, for good governance, that is horrendous. If this travesty is passed today in this Senate, we may as well call upon the Parliamentary Constabulary to remove our beloved, cherished national flag and hoist instead the symbol of the PNM cult atop this Red House. Furthermore, we should relocate the Parliament to the huge, spanking new edifice rising into the clear blue sky in Port of Spain, the $100 million Balize House, and change our nation's watchwords to, "Great is the dictator, great is the dictator, he has prevailed. Good night."
Blessings to all. Welcome to Facts, Not Fiction. Join me this Thursday the 16th for another Facebook Live at 7:30 p.m. sharp, yes. 7:30 p.m. sharp. Ladies and gentlemen, how long would you allow our Constitution to be eroded? How long? Join me this Thursday. I'm out.
This constitutional arrangement that we have is that the government will have its way. So the only thing we could do is talk.
And even so, Senator Roberts claims that right too is being eroded by the shortening of speaking time and chamber restrictions.
The COVID-19 protocols inside of this building do not even make sense. They have not made sense. All that they do is try to thwart our one thing that we can do, which is talk, give information so the media, the population can have. We've been curtailed. This building is huge.
wicked oppressor keep on trying to keep them under. Tell me, Lord, how long do my people have to suffer? No, I'm a warrior, I'm a fighter for what I stand for, and that's my total freedom. Said I'm a warrior, and I'm a fighter. Yes, I know I'm gonna have to fight on for my total freedom. Yeah, oh yeah. Oh.
Because this constitutional arrangement that we have is that the government will have its way.
And today we are engaged in this parliament. I think we are striking a dagger in the heart of the democracy of Trinidad and Tobago with this debate and on this order. Several speakers on the other side, the Prime Minister and I think the member for Tobago West, spoke about a lacuna in the law. Madam, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is no lacuna in the law. There is no lacuna in the law. The Prime Minister was at pains and basically repeated most of what he had said in the debate when the amendment bill was brought earlier this year. Lacuna in the law. It is very clear, and both the member for Diego Martin Northeast and the member for Diego Martin Northwest, in the debate to approve the report with respect to the standing orders of the House of Representatives in 2014, they praised the changes in the standing order. Minister Imbert was, in fact, very fulsome when he spoke about how great it was to have a tiebreaker. So people are speaking about where the tie was previously in our parliament, where we could not break the tie because there was no provision in our standing orders at that time. But in 2014, we changed the standing orders in order to put in a tiebreaker to draw lots. So we have statements from then opposition leader Dr. Rowley, 21st February 2014. I rise to join this debate on this, what I consider to be a watershed moment. Because if we get this done right, Mr. Speaker, significant positive changes can come to the management of the affairs of Trinidad and Tobago. And surprisingly, Prime Minister, then opposition leader, said, I want to associate myself with most of the comments made by my colleague from Oakbridge East. And at that time, remember, Oakbridge East piloted the motion to adopt the standing orders, within which we had placed in a tiebreaker into the House of Representatives standing order. But the Minister of Finance, then MP for Diego Martin Northeast, was he more fulsome in his praise? 14 March 2014. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me pleasure to join this debate. Especially I was a member of the committee that reported and made recommendations with respect to the revision of the standing orders. Continuing. What is proposed now is that in the event of a tie, and this is for the election of a speaker, the clerk shall proceed in accordance with paragraph 10 of the standing orders. And paragraph 10 of these standing orders, which is standing order 4, paragraph 410, this is what it says. After the holding of a ballot referred to, the votes, if they remain equal, clerk must determine by lot which candidate is to be eliminated. So the clerk will determine by lot. No, Mr. Imbert says, one might say that that is an unfair and undemocratic way of doing things. But that is a standard practice in many jurisdictions. That when you have an election and the votes are tied, you have to find some way of determining who the winner is. And in this case, what is proposed, the clerk will determine by lot, just drawing lots as to who the speaker will be. So what it will mean, although it is unlikely, because we now have an uneven number of parliamentarians, that was in 2014, it could happen at some time in the future. This is the member for Diego Martin Northeast, this is not the UNC. And then you say, well, no, you cannot apply these rules from the House standing orders, which again is not true. Prime Minister, you started off saying misinformation. We are feeding misinformation. Well, that is misinformation. There is no lacuna in the law. The standing orders, the regulations of the THA says where there is a absence or a silence on any particular matter, you revert to the standing orders of the House of Representatives. The THA itself says that in their standing orders. I believe it is 92. That you come to look where there is it. To come then to justify these changes in the boundaries and to say people are misinforming. Somebody even objected because we're holding a press conference. Can you believe that? That is our democratic right to speak on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And you will not stop us. The Attorney General came to bully and buff MP Saddam Hussein. Brilliant young lawyer, Saddam Hussein. I endorse the statements that he made. But it seems that the Attorney General has found himself in a place that he didn't really want to be. His argument about Section 71, he cannot on one hand speak about the independence of the Integrity Commission in the manner in which he did. It is either that he believes, which is according to law and the Constitution, that the EBC is to be an independent institution, or that he does not. He cannot equivocate on that. You are the Attorney General, you are the legal advisor to the Cabinet. No wonder they're making so many legal mistakes in the work that they're doing. And so that particular comment about Section 71 was totally unpalatable, unacceptable. We move on, Mr. Deputy Speaker. My colleague, MP Dinesh Rambali, my colleague Anita Haynes, MP, I endorse their contributions, brilliant contributions made here today. I can't say the same about some of the other contributions on the other side. And look, if you don't know the law, please don't speak about the law. Don't speak about it. Don't speak about it. So we have here an EBC order. And this EBC order, on the face of the order, says it is made pursuant to Section 4.1 of the BC Local Government and Tobago House of Assembly Act. This was the Amendment Act that came in earlier this year to create these 15 seats, or to provide for creating 15 seats, and for the EBC to provide a report. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is a concept in jurisprudence that the fruit from a poison tree is null and void because it's a poison fruit. And that act, which purported to provide for the 15 seats and for the EBC to provide a report within so many days and the other provisions, that is a poison tree. That piece of legislation is null and void and unconstitutional. And therefore, this report, which flows from it, is also null and void. It is null and void, and I'll explain why. So we have the situation where you're predicating this entire change in the boundaries on saying it is a law, it is a law, it is a law, it is a law, it is a law. How many times have you said that? The law that you passed with a simple majority, but which in effect you did in an unlawful and unconstitutional manner because there is existing law. You jumped the existing law in order to gerrymander or rowleymander, I'm sorry, sir, whatever kind of mandering. That's what you did. You truncated the existing law. You usurp the powers of the THA itself. And in our law, the Speaker is the presiding officer here. For the THA, the presiding officer could not be elected. We know the facts of the 6-6 tie and so on, but you could have resorted, as I said, to the rules from our standing orders. Now, this order, in my respectful view, it is irrational. It breaches the protection of the law principles, and it defeats the rule of law. And that is why this order is subject to cut down. The AG is saying, oh, judicial review where? Well, I'll show you, AG, because it seems as though you have stopped keeping abreast of the law. You stopped keeping abreast of the jurisprudence on what the protection of the law means. The protection of the law means protection of the citizen from irrational actions, from arbitrary actions, and the unreasonable exercise of discretion. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think of nothing which symbolizes irrationality and arbitrariness as does this EBC order. There is a case, Mr. Speaker, if you'll permit me to quote from it, a recent case from the UK Privy Council, It is in the case of Jamaicans for Justice versus the Police Service Commission, 2019 UKPC, and the Privy Council said as follows. The board is also disposed to accept, and I quote Mr. Deputy Speaker, the board is also disposed to accept that the right to equality before the law, like the right to the equal protection of the law, affords every person protection against irrational behavior, unreasonableness, fundamental unfairness, or the arbitrary exercise of power. This is the Privy Council in the Jamaican case. Protection of the law protects the citizen against irrational, arbitrary behavior. It continues. These are, in any event, fundamental common law principles governing the exercise of public functions. And there is nothing in the statutory framework governing, in that case was the PSC, to contradict them. They are applicable in this case irrespective of whether or not they have the status of a constitutional right. So you're entitled to the fundamental common law principles of protection of the law. Further, the jurisprudence is clear. Protection of the law means protection from arbitrary, irrational exercise of power. This order is, to me, a blatant example of arbitrariness and irrationality. The EBC used criteria in arriving at its order that is not contained in the legislation. They went outside the four corners of the statute, and you cannot do that. You have to operate within the confines of the statute. You are a statutory body. You must operate within the four corners of the statute which created you, a creature of statute. But they went outside the criteria to arrive at their order, and that is not contained using criteria that was not in the legislation. My colleagues have spoken about it. So what can we conclude? If a body is tasked, Mr. Speaker, Deputy, with an important function, and you have a statute which created you prescribing in law what factors should be considered, and that body decides to ignore those considerations and adopt its own criteria, you went outside of your own statute. We can only conclude that that body has become a runaway train, acting outside the four corners of the statute, a runaway train, a law unto themselves, acting arbitrarily, unlawfully, and in violation of the rule of law. We know the purpose of law then. Yes, the EBC has a discretion, but the public law, the jurisprudence has advanced so far in this day and age that the law is to confine and restrain discretion. The discretion must be used in a rational manner, in a reasonable manner. And if the EBC is going to make up its own rules as to how it determines boundaries, then we on this side are not afraid to say that both the EBC and the PNM administration are undermining the rule of law and the democracy of our land. If acting ultra vires outside the four corners of the statute was not bad enough, the EBC has made this even worse, its unlawful action, by acting in conflict with its own policy. The jurisprudence has advanced up to earlier this year in 2021, a case from the UK Privy Council on the application of A. Appellant versus the Secretary of State for the Home Department. The UK Supreme Court 2021 says, and this has to do with the issue of following your own policy. The court there said, in an important development in public law in the last decades, the courts have given policies greater effect. The court has given policies greater effect. Continuing the quote from the judgment. In certain circumstances, the left 5. Thank you. In certain circumstances, a policy may give rise to a legitimate expectation that a public authority will follow a particular procedure before taking a decision, and it may give rise to a legitimate expectation that the authority will confer a particular substantive benefit when it does decide how to exercise its functions, its discretion. In these cases, the court will give effect to the legitimate expectation unless the authority can show that departure from its policy is justified as a proportionate way of promoting a different interest. And proportionality cannot trump illegality. Beji today didn't talk about Surat. But proportionality cannot trump illegality, and I was saying the manner in which the EBC acted is illegal. The previous EBC reports were no doubt an expression of EBC policy. The statute tasked the EBC with doing an assessment of boundaries and districts. It did so and found no need for alteration in its last report. People say, why are we talking about last year's report? Just a few months ago, what has changed? What has changed to create these 15? And why 15? You could get a situation of 555, so therefore your cry and your lament is you want to deal with breaking ties. What happens if you get a 555? What's going to break the tie then? You'll come back now to the HR's standing orders? What are you going to do? A recipe for chaos. The EBC, in departing from its previous policy...
Members, please. Each one will have the opportunity to enter the debate. I want no chatting over the chamber, please. Thank you. Proceed, member.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for your protection. So the last report, I think about maybe just over 400 more persons are registered in Tobago since the last report last year. But it means that what was happening here, in the EBC in departing from its previous policy, is an example of acting irrational and acting inconsistent with your own policy. And that is arbitrary and irrational and unlawful. We can get an analogy in another way, but the other issue of irrationality is the consistency of methodology deployed. Consistency. My colleague went through great pains to share the stats. I will not do that again. And in describing and explaining the methodology. The Act, which governs how the method for the EBC, Schedule 2, it prescribes how the EBC should go about its assessment. But more than that, the EBC has historically done these reports. We have never heard any criteria about preserving communities. Never. Where did you get this new criteria from? Who told you to use that? And don't come to talking about a ridge in Tobago, Ms. Roma. Don't talk about it at all. Talking about doctors and lawyers on this side. Well, we know what we are doing and we'll speak it out. So you want to come about a ridge in Tobago. Where's the zip line? We could find the zip line? Can anybody find the zip line in Tobago? Not till today. Come here, self-righteous words in this parliament. And so we have consistency of the method deployed by the EBC. It is unknown to law and unknown in practice. The policy, the method to be used. Where did it come from? Did someone instruct the EBC to use this preserving communities? My colleague has said it's not a concrete wall that we'll put up. A boundary line is an imaginary line. He gave the example of Kuva and Shoguanas. So it's not a concrete wall that will divide you and you can't cross over the wall. So who came up with this? How did it come up with this criteria? You're going outside the four statutes of its four corners of the law which created your work and your method. And so the new criteria of preserving communities may have never been used before, but the previous reports, sir, none of them used that criteria. Why are you doing it now? And you were handcuffed by the cabinet and the parliament. In this parliament, the majority of the PNM cabinet in this parliament, you were handcuffed because they told you in this simple majority law, they said, look, you must provide for 15 seats. So you were handcuffed that before you did anything else, before you used any other method, use any criteria, you must find 15 seats. By hook or crook, go find 15 seats. Is that rational? Is that legal? And we are saying no. So there are no questions, sir, that elections are the bedrock of democracy.
Member, you have 2 more minutes.
I thank you, sir. I thank you. No question. Elections are the bedrock of democracy. The EBC and any authority vested with managing elections must embrace democratic norms, values, and conventions. That has not happened here. Our Constitution, its preamble at the very start, says we are a sovereign democratic state. And that has consequences for the rule of law, protection of the law, constitutional rights. This order breaches all those protections of the law. So gerrymandering, manipulating boundaries, inappropriately influencing the EBC to win an election is wrong in law. It is conspicuously unfair. And this order is one such that is conspicuously unfair in the manner in which they arrive at the order and the method they use. So Mr. Deputy Speaker, we reject outright this EBC order. And I have no doubt that when challenged in the courts, that this order will be struck down by the Supreme Court of Trinidad and Tobago for several of the reasons my colleagues have already shared, and some I have added to at this point in time. So thank you very much, sir, for your time to address the Parliament on this order. Thank you.
Blessings to all. Welcome to Facts, Not Fiction. Join me this Thursday the 16th for another Facebook Live at 7:30 p.m. sharp, yes. 7:30 p.m. sharp. Ladies and gentlemen, how long would you allow our Constitution to be eroded? How long? Join me this Thursday